Hello and welcome to PGurus channel for a special broadcast of Newsweek news. I beg your pardon of news capsule for today with Sridhar Chityalaji. Sridharji, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Namaskar and good morning to all.
Sir, there was a bombshell of a press conference yesterday by Mr. Rudy Giuliani for Donald Trump regarding the U.S. elections. What can you say about it, sir? And what are the important points that he touched upon? Does this mean that there are more things coming down the pipeline in terms of revelations?
Well, I think it was a very fascinating conference in terms of the intensity, the passion, and lasting 90 minutes covering a whole range of issues. Basically, it was he was reaffirming the number of issues that we have been talking about, but he was more specific in laying down the issues in several states: Pennsylvania, Georgia, Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin. He also brought up New Mexico and potentially Virginia, which they are looking at. So the issues ranged from all this. He called it as most outlandish and fraud perpetuated, whether it is by individuals or whether it happened in the voting centers. But he was making significant kind of, to use the Democratic or the media, allegations. And he was basically saying that the legal team has obtained several documents by way of affidavits from voters in the specific states, especially in constituencies such as metropolitan Detroit, Wayne County, then in Pennsylvania, and in state of Georgia, and then in Wisconsin, and these range from and Nevada. In fact, illegal verification process, lack of people, Republican representatives at the centers, especially in Georgia. He made a point that when there was a burst pipe, it was contemplated that there will be no further voting. The moment the Republicans stepped out, they found that the voting was continued with only Democratic reps. In the case of Pennsylvania, there seems to have been ballots which were not validated or verified or arrived post-dated that was accepted and got into the system. In the case of Michigan, the two representatives who were put under enormous pressure to validate and complete the verification process initially budged, subsequently rescinded, indicating that they were under enormous amount of pressure. So there's a range of issues, state by state, that he threw out without evidence or proof, except to say that the evidence and proof will be provided in the courts. But it was very forthright, it was very aggressive, and he went on to say that if these issues are brought to surface and the votes disqualified, in his words, the illegal votes disqualified in each of the states that he mentioned, then the president has effectively won the election. So it was quite combative and quite specific, which was unilaterally dismissed. In fact, 3 lawyers spoke. Then Sidney Lovell spoke, and Sidney spoke about issues in the Dominion software, as well as some of the data being resident in Barcelona and in Spain and in Germany, questioning the wisdom and the rationale of how the U.S. data can reside outside, especially the election data, whether it opens the door for any type of breach, potential breach, or software switching mechanisms by which votes can be switched between one candidate to the other candidate. Jenny talked about the media coverage as well as some of the issues, and she said that none of the stuff that they are reporting is being covered by the media. So there is no opportunity. So they have to use, in other words, the legal team has to use these press conferences and other mechanisms to get their kind of information across. So this was the basic thematic. It was quite explosive. Needless to say, the Republicans received it very warmly. The Democrats dismissed it. But if you are an objective, independent observer looking at this, it does raise a number of questions. In fact, even one of the things that has now come to surface is a data expert from Yale University is now going to give a sworn affidavit, and he's going to give the basis of sudden switchover of 100,000 votes in such a short time of span, he says, is impossible in terms of the vote switching from one to the other, unless there is some maleficence in the activity. That is also going to be recorded in front and an affidavit to be filed. So when you look at as an independent observer, the reason why we're not getting into the specific at a state level, which ideally, but we will probably soon get into that level of detail. What's Pennsylvania? What are 3 issues in Pennsylvania? What are 2 issues in Nevada? What are 3 issues in Michigan? What are 2 issues in Wisconsin? Now, the recount has happened in Georgia. Why the recount is invalid? The recount, according to this legal team, is invalid because they have done nothing. There is no kind of the process as well as the verification and validation as laid down by the Trump team, which is in compliance with the legal norms, was not followed. So therefore, when they were counting, they were just simply recounting the same old votes, which is under contention. So you have this issue as well in Georgia, something similar in Arizona, and Nevada has even a deeper issue, which is namely the many people who did not request the votes were posted the ballots, and many of them happened to be dead. To the extent of something like 2,500 people or 3,000, some number that is being quantified, were dead people, whose votes were polled. So, as an independent observer, when you look at it, if you want to itemize it and kind of say, then we need to be in a very kind of crystal clear position. What is going to be the filing? Otherwise, if I put something up today, within 2 hours, either it's going to be disqualified or it is going to be changed. So we are dealing with a moving feast in these 5 or 6 states in terms of the level of specifics that will eventually form the basis of the filing in terms of what is going to be contested and what is going to be analyzed and eventually either qualified or disqualified based on the evidence being presented.
Well, there are also many other allegations doing the rounds, and we would like viewers to exercise caution. What we state here are facts that are being proven in by more than one source, by more than one means. So we have our data right, and please stay within that ambit. And what we want to say is the ones that are factually correct. Now, Sridharji, there is one question I have regarding the sovereignty of having the data being analyzed in Germany and in Spain. This is highly unusual, although one might say it's not illegal, but why on the earth would US election data be sent to Germany and Spain, sir?
Well, the only thing that I can conclude, I'm not an IT expert, but whether this software, Dominion software that is being used, whether some of these servers, if it is outsourced, the work that is being performed by this software on the servers, whether some of these servers were located outside the country, and whether somebody validated it to be the case. That's one set of questions. The another set of questions is, did the data really reside outside, or the data reside within the perimeter of the United States? Now, the legal team has to prove. Right now, they have listed this yesterday in the press briefing as an issue, right? But they have not established in the press meet, well, we have fait accompli. It's like an open and shut case in terms of the data being. It is believed that the data is residing outside, but it's not been proven. Yesterday, a couple of media personalities said, "Okay, prove it. If it is, prove that the data is outside. If that's the case, then this issue could be very serious." Some of the people had also in the same conference, either Lynn or Jenny, or whether it is Rudy, they threw this issue, which is namely this software seems to have been used by Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. Why would you kind of use such a type of software? Then another allegation was thrown, people like George Soros, Hillary Clinton were behind this software company, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of that information that was thrown yesterday, right? So if you're sitting and listening to that conference, it's quite stunning, and it is quite revealing in terms of the level of data and information and personalities that was thrown around. Now, whether it is proven or not, whether it is going to be established, whether it will form the basis of the case, we will know, pretty soon, within, maybe early to mid next week. This should all come to surface by way of tangible framework of a case that can be discussed, debated, and resolved as a way forward. In the meanwhile, there's also pressure for some of the states to complete the verification process. The verification process is that once the secretary completes all the kind of the counting, does the audit, etc., then 2 members from the Democratic and 2 members from the Republican Party have to certify. If they don't certify, then we have a gridlock in terms of completing that verification process and sending the results as approved results from the specific state. So we have that issue to overcome as well.
Sir, moving on to COVID, there is now lockdown in place even in state like California. We have night curfew, 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. You cannot move outside. And this is happening across the country. Now, it appears that not everybody is happy with the way this is being imposed, especially parents of children who are going to school, because when you turn school off, what happens is if those parents who can't work from home, who have to go to a workplace, have to figure out a way to make sure that their children find a place to stay, because they have to be babysat, arrangements have to be made. So a lot of churn that's going on there. Also, we have a couple of drugs getting the FDA approval, including remdesivir of Gilead Sciences. Can you throw a little bit more light about this COVID thing? Do you think it's going to be for just 1 month, or do you think that it will be for many more months down the road?
This whole shutdowns is being received with very mixed emotions and very mixed opinions. Many people don't accept these shutdowns as a solution, very notably the school shutdowns. They feel the root cause of the issues is not schools, but some of the restaurants, but mostly gyms, particularly, and some restaurants. They kind of singled out gyms for that reason. The kids being targeted and schools being closed. So that's one set of issues. The second set of issues that businesses say that they are conducting, so they're having social distancing. It is causing insurmountable amount of issues in terms of disruptions to their kind of life, and they are not the root cause of the evolution or the growth in the numbers. So it has become a very political hot potato where you have Democratic states, some of the Democratic states going from shutdowns to extremities that you see like in New York or California. California has got a curfew. We had curfews in New York, and now shutdowns and in New York. So the story is, to answer your question, they say it is short term or short time. Whether it is political, whether it is medical, we don't know. But the fact is that there is rising cases. The cause of rising cases is possible because of social distancing and other issues which we don't know. And there is also now many Democratic states, and if President-elect Biden takes office, they also are contemplating for 6 weeks to 6 months mandatory wearing of masks through an enforcement process. If you don't wear, then of course There's going to be forms of punishment. So whether it's going to take, clearly, the reports coming from Europe is that this is going to stay, these types of things are going to stay for at least 6 months to bring this virus under control, because we have now crossed a threshold. I haven't looked at the numbers, but it's somewhere now close to somewhere between 56 to 60 million people. The numbers have, are skyrocketing. There's no doubt about it. But there's also what the fact that's not mentioned is that there is a very good recovery rate relative to where we were when this virus started. And then you have a whole series of vaccines that are coming into play in terms of accelerated deployment. Some similar vaccines like Pfizer, BioNTech, Moderna. Then you have Covaxin in India. Then you have Sputnik. Then you have the Eli Lilly plasma transplant. Now, we also got yesterday AstraZeneca's remdesivir back into circulation. Only after a few hours later, WHO saying the data is incorrect and the data has proven otherwise, that remdesivir should not be prescribed. So we are back to that controversy as well. Whether the markets or whether the countries will follow that, we don't know, but we have that issue as well. So there is a set of programs that could address some of the issues, and things could change over the next 6 months. But right now, in the absence of the vaccines being rolled out, we are looking at this political hot potato of shutdowns, no shutdowns, etc. So I think that some states may choose not to have shutdowns because it's causing too much of disruption.
Sir, moving on to India, one of the things that Biden said that he will do is to rejoin the Paris Accord and reinforce all these carbon credits and all the carbon consumption limits. Now, if you look at that from India's perspective, how good are the chances that India will be able to comply with its end of the bargain? And if US will not only be doing its own share, but also be making up for other countries' non-compliance. What are your thoughts on that, sir?
Well, it's a fabulous question, and it's almost like lost in the din. India seems to be the only country within the G20 which seems very close, if not almost there, in terms of compliant with the guidelines to that -2 degrees centigrade norm. They're pretty close, almost there. And they're well down the path. So the question therefore is, they signed up to it and they have implemented the programs and they have further advanced. Then the question comes up that Mr. Biden has committed. This is the left wing pushing, and yesterday even AOC talked about Green Accord. $450 billion is a lot of money. Who is puffing? I mean, there is somehow, United States is not pushing so much, right? So question therefore is, where is this money going to go? And what is the economic outcome and environmental outcome if it has no mechanism to contain it? If China says, I will take my own time. It doesn't need to comply till 2030. So we are talking about another 10 years before they come anywhere near. In the meanwhile, the $450 billion is gone, right? His money is gone that they committed. But having said that, your question is around India. I think India has done exceptionally well. It's well on its way in terms of meeting its obligations.
Sir, the next question for you is that the Minister of External Affairs, Sree Jaishankar, is going to be representing India in the Afghan summit in Geneva. What do you think is going to be accomplished? Because India is still sitting on the fence in terms of what it would like to do alongside the United States. United States has sought help from India to keep peace in the region, and that means boots on the ground. India has been vacillating on that. What are your thoughts, sir? What are your expectations of this particular meeting? And do you think anything will be accomplished where India will have a definite path for how it can help the Afghans?
Well, there's going to be 70 countries represented in this peace conference in Geneva with the objective of bringing, peace, stability, and harmony in Afghanistan, which they have not achieved for almost, several decades. So it's good for Mr. Jaishankar to be there along with other people. India will do what it is already doing, has committed money, I think, if I'm right, to the welfare and developmental programs. They're also helping Afghans in quite a number of areas. The general relationship between India and Afghanistan seems to be good. Now, the question, therefore, is you saw that Mr. Trump announced withdrawal of another 2,500 troops from Afghanistan, right? They're coming home before Christmas. The question, therefore, is and Taliban is going to be active, was at the negotiating table, whether there is going to be turmoil back again and how the turmoil will be addressed. And it's a $1 billion question, which is namely, developmental programs cannot go if there is consistent kind of what you call as terrorism and other types of activities brewing, violent activities brewing in the region. So the question is, who is going to manage it? As you rightly said, who is going to put boots on the ground? Obviously, the Pakistanis are going to be very active. The Chinese want to be very active. The Russians want to be active. So you are back into the potpourri of, and then we have brewing tensions between United States and Iran. Further trade sanctions have been imposed on Iran. Now, whether Biden would, and Iran borders Afghanistan, right? So whether there's going to be, and there is Al Qaeda now Al Qaeda is both in Iran as well as in Afghanistan. So the question, therefore, is how does all these things come up? Will not be discussed in your Geneva meet, but I'm sure that these things are going to warrant attention. Whether India will put boots on the ground, I don't know. I very much doubt whether they would put boots on the ground.
Here is the concern for me as a taxpayer in the United States. When we withdraw troops from Afghanistan, we are creating a partial vacuum of sorts, and that vacuum is going to be filled by the Pakistan-supported Taliban. There is no doubt about the two being in hand and glove with each other. So now US goes and turns around and aids Pakistan, which in turn will use some of that at least to try and kill the remaining US troops in Afghanistan. I just don't understand this policy of mollycoddling Pakistan, and now you are really putting the lives of the remaining soldiers of the United States in danger there. In Bagram, I heard that there used to be 5,000. If say about 1,000 of the 2,000 return back from there, that is a very sophisticated state-of-the-art base, and the United States cannot afford to vacate that. It needs to leave it in the hands of a responsible country, and Afghanistan is not yet ready to accept that, because we have had situations where the Afghans, having been trained by the United States, then they go back to being what they were before, which is to do whatever they are pursuing. You have lots of warlords, lots of regional satraps and so on, what have you. So much muddying there. So there is need for some sort of an umpire to keep the stability there. So this I find this conundrum quite puzzling. Now, if the Biden administration, or I don't know if Trump will be coming back, whoever it is, the United States need to really take a hard look at why it is funding taxpayer money into Pakistan when it is going to be used to shoot its own people.
Well, I think first, I think you've brought a whole range of interesting kind of topics. First and foremost, I think how long United States can be the arbitrator of peace and spending money and spending its very precious lives of its soldiers, right? It was post 9/11, and most of the people seem to have hailed from there. That resulted in the war in Afghanistan, post Iraq. The war seems to have originated in Afghanistan. Then you had, then we had issues around. Then we had issues around Iraq, and then we are back into Afghanistan. So 2 wars were fought. So there's a lot of fatigue around between Iraq and Afghanistan. Afghanistan has lingered on and on and on. with no solution or resolution in sight. So you are now reached a fatigue syndrome. There was one set of the Obama, Biden, and to great extent George Bush's administration funded the Pakistanis, continued the aid with the assumption that they would be the peacekeepers and they would also facilitate and augment the capabilities. That plan did not work. The things continued. Then Trump administration came and Trump kind of cut off the aid, saying that that there is no benefit that is being derived, rather the money, and there's increased activity from Pakistan, which they stoutly denied. Now we are continuing in a stalemate situation in Afghanistan, and India is unwilling to step up to put boots on the ground. India is willing to be helpful in education, healthcare, development, infrastructure programs. And even Indian embassy and Indian people have been attacked in Afghanistan while carrying out this work. So there seems to be no solution that seems evident or imminent in Afghanistan. Under those circumstances, it's an ROI type of a game, which is to say, okay, what can we do minimum and as a deterrence rather than trying to solve this, which has not been solved at all. It seems to be the decision from the Trump administration as it finishes its term. Whether it comes back or not, we don't know. And in case Biden comes in, whether we'll go back to the old status quo remains to be seen, sir.
It's very strange that, PGurus gets accused of being a pro-Trump organization, but you realize, viewers, that under the Trump 4-year rule, US did not start a new war. In fact, US has been very effective in bringing about a lot of peace accords between Israel and many Middle East countries. So there is some good stuff also that Trump has done. Why can't the media look at that also? Why don't you have a biased why do you have a biased perspective? I'll also give you a simple thing. Yesterday, just one day yesterday, there was a teleprompter malfunction and Biden was at a loss for words. And also, there was a bombshell of a press conference by Rudy Giuliani, and the mainstream media is talking about sweat trickling down his sideburns and melting some of the dye that he was using in his hair. Is that the news? Was he not there for 90 minutes talking about something else? So this kind of trivialization that is happening is just amazing. Anyway, I'm on a rant here. We have 2 more minutes left. There's an important topic I wanted to talk about. This is about the economy and the varying opinions between the Fed chair and the Treasury Secretary. What do you make of it, sir?
Well, I think that it's a classic case of a commercial corporate banker in Mnuchin who runs the Treasury to say that programs have a defined timeline, and so therefore the programs expire on December 31st, and so any unfunded part of the capital that is set aside, which was roughly just $750 billion was assigned, and part of the money was used effectively for what you call as the CARES program, which is coronavirus response emergency services program. So the objective of the CARES Act will expire on December 31st, and the question therefore is, to renew that program, you have to come back with a proposal which gets approved by the Congress before December 31st, and an allocation occurs in the new budget. Now, this is the view of Steve Mnuchin. Fed's view is, you have already allocated the money to us. We may not have spent it, but lo and behold, something happens, then we need to have money readily available on hand, which you have given us, we will use it. So it's a technical issue. The difference of opinion between the Fed and the Treasury, seems to have some amount of disquiet. Now, assume that if there was administrative stability, that is, the next year was to be a continuation of the Trump administration without an election, this issue would not pop up. But now we have this issue of the transition from one administration to another administration, albeit it may be the same thing. So what Steve Mnuchin is saying is, I'm following the rules of the game, and the rules of the game is that the budgets don't accrue, the budgets have to be approved on if you want to incur the expenses. I think that seems to be the situation.
Well, sir, that brings us to a close of this special news capsule. It was 30 minutes long. Thanks for watching. Your support is unprecedented, and I hope you'll be back in about an hour and a half to join us again to talk to Sri Tathagat Roy at PGurus Prime Time, 9 p.m. IST. Thank you once again, Sridhar Chityala ji, and Namaskar.
Namaskar and thank you, sir.